Listening to the Aligned Birth Podcast. I am Dr. Shannon. I'm one of the hosts of the show, and today is an interview day. I love these interviews that we get to do. We have another amazing birth worker on. This is fun because I know her again in the social media world, but I haven't met her in real life. So hopefully one day we meet in real life. But we have a birth doula, a photographer, and a Hypnobabies instructor on today. So it is Milène with Harmony Birth Services. So we're talking all things Hypnobabies, like childbirth education. That's what I really want to focus on with the show today, is really why Hypnobabies, what is it, how has it helped the women that she's worked with? Did she use it herself? Because she's got a good amount of kids as well too. We'll get into that in a minute. So that's a big focus of it. But then how she got into this birth worker world. Did her, births inspire it, or is it just something that she's been led to do? So with Milène, she was born and raised in South Africa. So she's moved with her parents, two older sisters, to San Jose, California. And then she met her husband and got married that next year. So at 21, she met her husband, got married. And then now they have 4 kids. So right now they're 10, 7, 4, and 2. So I guess you could say she has her hands full. July of 2021, they moved from California all the way to Georgia. So now she's in Georgia. And then a year ago, she turned her passion for birth into a tangible job. And so really becoming a doula, picking up the camera and looking at birth photography, and then becoming a Hypnobabies instructor. And so now she's attended her 30th birth, and I'm so excited to chat today with you.
Welcome to the Aligned Birth Podcast. I'm Dr. Shannon, a prenatal chiropractor.
And I'm Rachel, a birth doula and childbirth educator. Together, we're here to bring you conversations about pregnancy, birth, and motherhood. From cesarean to VBAC, hospital to home births, we've experienced it all. We are high school friends who reconnected through our shared passion for health and birth. As moms to 2 young boys, we've both changed careers after our own transformative childbirth experiences.
Join us as we discuss the importance of a healthy body and mind throughout pregnancy, birth, and into motherhood. Our goal is to provide fun, interesting, and helpful conversations and interviews that inspire learning. When your body, mind, and intuition are aligned, you can conquer anything.
Sit back and relax, or grab a notebook and take some notes, or maybe listen as you enjoy a walk. However you choose to listen, we hope you enjoy this episode of the Aligned Birth Podcast. Before we get into the episode today, if you enjoy the content of this podcast, we would greatly appreciate your support in one of 3 ways. First, leave us a review or give us a 5-star rating. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners and make a bigger impact. Second, you can sign up for our newsletter. By doing so, you'll be the first to receive new episodes and exclusive bonus resources straight to your inbox each week. Lastly, you can become a direct listener supporter. Running this podcast requires significant time, effort, and resources. Your contribution, no matter the amount, helps us continue providing valuable content to a wider audience. Simply use the links in the show notes to make your donation, sign up for our newsletter, or leave us a review. Every contribution matters and is sincerely appreciated. If the Aligned Birth Podcast is a part of your weekly routine and you love what we are doing, please consider supporting us through one of these 3 options. Your support will create a ripple effect, allowing us to reach more listeners and make a lasting difference.
Milène, welcome to the show, friend.
All right, thank you for having me. Welcome to you too. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. I was really excited to get to talk to you today.
I know. So, and you're connected with Rachel, who is the co-host on the show as well too, with North Atlanta Birth Services as well. So I know you're kind of in that doula aspect of you do your own thing, but you also work within that realm with them as well too. So I think that's kind of how I had found you, but obviously too, social media and seeing your beautiful birth photography on Instagram, I think
Thank you.
think that kind of captured my eye. So we'll have on there like all the links to where people can find you and follow you and stuff, because the pictures are so good. They're so good.
Thank you.
I love it. And you were the doula and photographer for, we had birth stories with Jessica. And so she was the one that had the from cesarean to unassisted home birth. And you were the doula at the unassisted home birth, right?
Yes, I was.
So I'll have to link to that so people can listen to the story, because she talks about the hypno birthing as well and how she used that. So I don't know, before this, Milène and I were chatting, because I'm trying to figure out where I want to start with this and maybe a little bit of how did you get into the doula world and why doula work for you?
Yeah. So I'm going to kind of start with, gosh.
I know, how far back do we go? It's a big question.
I'm going to go back a little bit. I'm going to go back to, when I was a teenager, I had this passion. I always loved, like, anytime I saw a pregnant woman, I was like, I just love, like, pregnancy. I just thought it was so cool. And then as, a high schooler, I said, I would love to become an OBGYN so that I can work with women during their pregnancy and childbirth. And I had this idea in my head that that's the only way you can work with pregnant women, right? Like, you have to go into the medical field to be able to pursue that line of work. So went through high school, got into college, wasn't really like gelling with the whole, like, I was like, I don't think I'm going to go like the full doctor route. This is not really me. Dabbled in a lot of things, really loved the social sciences, ended up really feeling drawn to psychology and becoming like a family and marriage counselor. Again, like, I really wanted to help families and like women and like this process of like of relationships. And so that's always been where my heart is to help kind of in this stage of life where people have young children and maybe they're going through stuff, right? And so I was in my junior year at university when I had my first son. And that kind of put a stall on my studies. But I said, you know what, that's fine. If I, get some life experience, that's probably a really good thing for a counselor to have. So I was like, that's okay. I'm consciously making this choice. Like, I want to start my family. And so I'm going to put my studies kind of on pause so I can start a family. And I went into my birth with a very open mind. I didn't have this like past, or I didn't have a lot of kind of fear surrounding birth really going into it, because the stories that I grew up with were largely positive. And so, but I did trust my OBGYN. I said, I want to have this natural birth. I don't want, an epidural. I want to just do it by myself. But I didn't go into it any further than that. Mm-hmm. And so on the day, I just sort of trusted her advice. And I believe that she knew what I wanted and that she would support me in the outcome I was looking for. Not realizing that that's not how things work, really. And that OBGYNs aren't really trained in, the natural birth process. And so I was about 4 centimeters when she said, well, why don't we break your water and speed this thing up and get this baby out? And I was like, hey, sure, why not?
Sounds great. Yeah.
It was like a great idea. And that just sort of started the whole cascade of interventions. And so eventually, I ended up with sort of the whole host of things that you can imagine that somebody would get, and ended up with about at 8-9 centimeters getting an emergency cesarean because the baby wasn't tolerating labor anymore. And so that was that. And it wasn't this overwhelmingly traumatic experience at the time. Probably the most traumatic part was that I saw my baby leaving the OR without them showing him to me. After they told me specifically they would, they just sort of like rushed him out, and I didn't know what was going on. He hadn't cried yet, and I was very concerned. And then my husband left, and then I was all by myself. And I think of it as a mercy that at that point the anesthesiologist actually knocked me out, and so I woke up and I got to meet my son. But a couple of years later, I was faced with the question of, am I going to have a repeat cesarean, or am I going to try for a vaginal birth? And I said, I have to try. if I don't try, I'm going to wonder what if my whole life. And so then when I said, okay, I'm going to try, I decided if I'm going to do this, I have to go in all the way. And that's where the whole process began. And so on this path of like going in all the way, I, learned about birth doulas, and I hired a doula, and she was an amazing photographer, which ties into why I became a photographer. And then I looked at all the I started researching birth classes. And I looked, at Lamaze and at Bradley, and I looked at all the different kind of options out there. I found hypnobirthing. I thought, oh, this looks really cool. I got the book, like the hypnobirthing book. I read through that. I did some of like the breathing exercises. I kept kind of looking. And that's when I stumbled on Hypnobabies. And everything that Hypnobabies talked about, I was like, this is what I want. And Hypnobabies is giving me concrete steps and tools and methods of getting the birth that I want. And so originally I actually bought their home study guide. I was just going to do it at home by myself. And then I said, you know what, this isn't good enough for me. I know myself, and I don't feel like I feel like I might like slack off and not do this properly if I try to do it by myself at home. And so I told my husband, we need to sign up for the classes that are in person. And I know it's like a 45-minute drive, up into the city once a week for 6 weeks. And we got my parents to watch the baby for us for 6 weeks in a row. And it was this whole big thing. And because the classes are really long, it went like late into the night, but we did it. And so my husband and I went to the 6-week long Hypnobabies series, and it just sort of changed my entire life, really, because it not only was it teaching you birth hypnosis and how to have a comfortable, easier birth, it also was all of that childbirth education that I was missing previously.
Okay, I was going to ask, did
Yes.
you take childbirth education with that first at all, or was it maybe it was just the hospital based, or maybe just from what your OB had kind of talked about?
Yeah. And so that, we had done like a weekend express class, where it mostly talks about when you get to the hospital, you have to do this, and it's all about like the hospital policies. And they had you like hold an ice cube in your hand to try to simulate. It's like, okay, just breathe through and like, then that's about as hard as it'll get. And so with Hypnobabies, it just went into so much more depth about what is birth, what are all the processes, what's happening to your body, what are your options, what are your choices in birth, because that's a huge part of it. You have options, you have choices. And so and then you practice every day, right? With your hypnosis, you practice every day how to go into that state of hypnosis where you are so deeply relaxed and your whole body just kind of becomes heavy and it just melts away all the tension. And they have tracks for fear clearing. And so when you're holding on to any kind of like fear, you're able to listen to that to try to kind of just release that fear that you might be holding on to. And actually that was when I was 37 weeks pregnant with my second. My mom was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I had this immensely sort of anxiety-filled couple weeks. And I remembered I just like leaned heavily into my tracks, and I was like, I just need to like listen to my fear clearing. Like I just need to take this like real step of taking my nervous system and just like calming it down again. And when the time came and my birthing time started, I actually my water kind of trickled. It wasn't a true rupture, and thank goodness I ended up being at the hospital with the lowest cesarean rate and the highest VBAC success rate, and the whole L&D was run by midwives, and this was by chance. This wasn't by design.
I was going to say, did you change OB practices or anything?
I did, but because we had to. So when we went from 2 people on our insurance policy to being a family, our premium jumped so high that we had to switch. We actually switched to Kaiser, California. And in California, they're this huge thing. So they have their own hospitals. And so I was with Kaiser in San Jose, and they have this amazing hospital where you have access to like gas and air, and like the nurses will offer you a TENS unit if you want it. And just very supportive of natural birth. And so when I went in, and I said, I think my water broke. They tested it. And then they said, we're not going to check your cervix because your water hasn't ruptured yet. And we don't want to introduce infection, which is something I have yet to experience here. Every single time somebody goes in and their water's broken, they go right up ahead and check their cervix.
Thing to do, yeah.
And they said, I remember my midwife sitting down with me and saying, okay, your birthing waves, haven't started yet. It's up to you. How long are you comfortable waiting before we start any kind of augmentation? There's no pressure yet, or you have a lot of time. And she had this conversation with me. She wasn't standing over me. She was sitting at the foot of my bed. And I said, I think I want to wait at least 24 hours. And she said, okay. And at 24 hours, we can start talking about, what are the next steps? And so that night, at about the 12-hour mark, finally things kind of kicked into high gear very quickly. And an hour and a half later, I was holding my baby.
Oh, gosh.
So, yes. But that started it all. So I fell in love with birth.
Like, that's my answer to your first question.
Yes, that's my answer. I fell in love with birth. I fell in love with Hypnobabies. I used it again for my daughter's birth. It was actually 9 hours for hers. And it was like the most beautiful, calm, like that was my true, I always say that's my true Hypnobabies birth, where I was just this like picture of calmness and serenity, and like it was perfect. And then in 2020 I had my son, and he was my planned home birth, and he was a 40-minute from my first real sort of birthing wave to when he was born was 40 minutes. He was sort of similar to my other son, like my water had ruptured and for 6 hours nothing happened, and then once it did, it went real quick. But through all of these, I had my doula with me every single time. She took pictures every single time. So I have beautiful pictures of my children's births, and they mean the world to me. My children love to look at them. They love seeing the stories of how they were born. And so this has immense value to me. Having birth photography holds huge value to me. And in my head, I never thought about becoming a doula for a very long time. There was one time where I kind of thought about it. And I was like, oh, that wouldn't work with my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kind of put it aside. And then when we moved to Georgia, there was one day I was sitting, just kind of scrolling through Facebook, and I saw on a mom's board that I'm part of, one of the moms groups, somebody asking about a doula. And it was like, there are very few moments in life where you feel like God is speaking to you clearly.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, he was like, you need to do this. This is what I want you to do. And I had struggled a lot in my life, not knowing exactly what I felt like I was meant to do. I had a lot of things that I felt like I could do. And I kept waiting for that thing that was like, this is what I should do. This is what I'm meant to do. And he was like, this is what I've been preparing you for. This is what I want you to do. And I don't want you to wait. I want you to go. I wanted you to do it right now. And I was like, okay. And so I didn't feel unprepared because I had all these years of learning about birth and pursuing it myself. And so I jumped right in, and I got taken kind of by storm. I don't know how else to describe it. I wasn't expecting to be where I am last year to now. And, it's been such an amazing journey, but yeah, and one of the first things that I said was, once I said, oh my gosh, I'm going to be a doula, I said, well, how do I become a Hypnobabies instructor? And so I went on their website and I looked up, how do you become a Hypnobabies instructor? And I saw that, they only take one group a year. So they take about, between 15 to 20 applications a year. And they take this one sort of cohort every year. and you get a ton of work. And then you do an in-person sort of intensive, like few days where they actually teach you how to teach hypnobabies. But for the next, from it was about September last year until May of this year, I was doing all kind of home study stuff. And it was like a full introductory course to hypnosis. It was a ton of work. I haven't read and written that much since I was in college. I was like, this really is on par with any of the classes I took in university. The amount of information that they were having us learn. And then to actually, it wasn't just, just read the stuff. It was, you had to then now write about it.
Mm-hmm.
Many words, pages and pages and pages of words that you have to write in response to, and lots of questions that you have to answer about what you have read. And so went through that, did certification, had to do a big test to get certified. And in June of this year, I finally got my certification. And so it was a very big milestone for me, and have been kind of trying to get going and, teaching classes and finding my groove. And so, that's kind of where I am now.
So that's a fun, full circle trip.
It is.
I know right before we started recording, when we were chatting a little bit, because I love your website because you do have like an About Me page, and it really does go through a little bit of that birth history for you. And so I think that's why I like to talk about these things with birth workers, because not that I want birth workers to come in with some sort of, bias into the world, but also some sort of just why you do what you do type of thing. And so those life experiences can lead to it. But I know you and I had very similar verse as far as that, just that cascade of interventions there. So, and you even said it, I remember with my second one, I was at 36 weeks and I was like, oh my gosh, if I don't want to have another cesarean, I've got to do something differently. Like I've got to change something from what I was doing beforehand. And so you did the same thing. It was like, okay, well, how can I set myself up for success, with that? So I just love that. I love that part of your story, and then how it branched into all the kiddos.
Yes, I had lots of kiddos in the end.
Yeah, I know. And I like that you had your hospital birth that went well, and then even your home birth here. So
yes.
You've experienced them all. That's really fun. That's a good background and history to have.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's get into a little bit. I want to go a little more in depth with Hypnobabies, because you talked about it is well, I don't want to say intensive class, but it is it's a commitment, and it sounds like there's a good deal of time involved too. Because I too just took the hospital childbirth education weekend class, which was a lot of hospital policies. So this is why I always really do advocate for something outside of just that hospital class. So where should we start with let's go with what is hypnosis? Like, so it is a full blown like hypnosis aspect of things, and then those tools are just applied to the birthing process. I mean, I know you talked about using these skills at other parts in your life. So let's start with that hypnosis aspect, because it's not like someone's there with you. I guess people think of hypnosis as someone else is leading you in something. So this has got to be something that you can lead yourself in, correct?
Yes.
So maybe let's start with that.
So it's considered self-hypnosis, what we do in Hypnobabies, but ultimately all hypnosis is actually considered self-hypnosis. And the reason for that is that it's always a choice. Even when you are engaging in like hypnotherapy with a hypnotherapist, you are saying, I want to be here. I'm engaging in this. I'm saying yes. And so anytime you are engaging in hypnosis, you have to say yes and mentally go along with the process. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And so Hypnosis at its sort of core, or in its most simplest definition, I guess, is when we take we have our conscious mind and our subconscious mind, and in between the two we have our critical faculty, which is like sort of like like a filter. And so when we hear something consciously, our critical faculty is able to listen and to say, is this true to what my belief system says I believe? And it can either reject or accept whatever you have just heard. And so what our goal is to get into the subconscious mind, bypass the critical faculty. And the way that we do that is through hypnosis. And so hypnosis kind of puts the critical faculty in a state of rest where we can kind of go around it and access our subconscious mind. And our subconscious mind is where we can then affect the greatest change. Because when we go into our subconscious mind, which is where we house our entire life experience, and that is what then creates our belief systems about different things. And so we go into that belief system of birth. What has our entire life taught us what birth is? And that's what we believe on a subconscious level about birth. Now, depending on who you are and sort of what your experiences has been, and maybe what movies you've watched, and what our culture has told you as a child and as a young person growing up, maybe well-meaning friends have talked to you about their births. You have this belief system of what you think birth is like. And for most of us, it's a little scary. And so how do we change that? How do we change that belief system? How do we make it less scary? How do we change the idea that birth is filled with pain, and change that narrative? And so how can we make it something that can be, filled with joy? How can it be something that is normal, natural? The feelings that you experience are not feelings necessarily of pain. It can be feelings of pressure, of pulling, of tugging. It's normal bodily sensations. And yes, maybe it's intense. Maybe there's a degree of discomfort in there, but it's normal. You don't have to fear it. It's not something that is happening, to you. It's happening inside of you and is part of you. And so when we are able to change that belief system, it becomes something that you don't have to consciously think, because your subconscious is just believing it already. And the way that we do that is we kind of put this, we put the critical faculty to rest, and then we give suggestions to the subconscious mind. And so that is what a lot of the process in Hypnobabies on the hypnosis side is about. It is about like listening to tracks that have a lot of positive suggestions in them about birth, about the birthing experience. And we talk a lot, it really is just all filled with this positive message about birth. And so we're trying to give your mind new food and fill it, and to try to kind of, let's throw out that old belief system so that your new belief system is good and it's positive, and you don't go into birth expecting what the old system told you, but now you have changed that belief system out. And so that is the sort of, if you talk about the hypnotherapy aspect of Hypnobabies, that's a lot of the process. And that is why you need time, because hypnosis it builds on each other. Then one of the beautiful side effects of being in hypnosis is having this physical relaxation and comfort. And so we lean into that, and we say, when you use this during your birthing time, when you are physically relaxed and comfortable, and you continue to do, because it really has to be a continual process. You can't do it for 5 minutes and then say, okay, I'm good for the rest of my birth. You have to keep doing it. And then we give you tools to keep doing it. We give your partner tools. We give you tools to continually kind of feed that hypnosis so that you stay in a physically relaxed and calm state. where your muscles are loose and relaxed. And so you don't experience as much tension.
Yeah.
And when the
Probably in the
tension is,
jaw.
yes. And when the tension is gone, we experience less discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are able to be in a much more comfortable state throughout our births, and our body is able to work more efficiently, because when you are comfortable and you are in in that relaxed state, your birthing hormones are going to work better, right? It's going to, like, the flow of birthing hormones is just going to just keep going more efficiently, and your uterus will be, doing its job without anything from the outside standing in its way. And so we get this birthing process that just sort of goes a little bit smoother than it maybe would have, while you stay much more comfortable. And one of the big things that I have noticed that really kind of struck me is and I will say that this state of very deep relaxation and very deep, that sort of state of hypnosis, Hypnobabies gives you a very clear way of achieving that. It gives you steps, things to do, tools to use. You can do it without Hypnobabies. There are other ways that you can achieve this, but it's maybe a little bit more difficult, and you have to really dig to find what your thing is. And so Hypnobabies just gives you a clear, this is the program. If you follow these steps, if you use these tools, if you start early, they really lay it out very clearly so that you are able to use it. And what I've noticed with these moms, in a very kind of real way, a very measurable way, is that when you have a mom who is in that beautiful, relaxed state, you see it on the heart rate monitors. And mom's heart rate is, high 60s, 70s, kind of, you can see she's not working that hard. As opposed to moms that are really struggling, right? That are just barely coping. And then your heart rate goes into the 90s, the 100s, and you're working really hard. Your respiratory rate goes up really high. You're physically exerting yourself. And that then plays into the postpartum experience.
Exactly.
And that's, I personally experienced this, where after my births, I was like, I'm jumping out of bed, walking around. All the nurses were like, whoa, sit down. I'm like, I feel fine. I feel great. I don't feel tired, because I was in a calm, restful state.
You weren't fighting it, right? It's called that sympathetic tone, that fight or flight. You weren't fighting it as much. And so that's kind of what this sounds like, is it does promote that parasympathetic, to where it's more of that ease. Yeah, because if you're fighting it, then you're
resting
more.
More.
Stressed.
So you're just not working as hard. And mentally, you're maybe playing a game and really kind of keep feeding into yourself mentally. And that, when you keep feeding into yourself mentally, it has a physical response. And so that's, one of the things that I absolutely love about Hypnobabies, and the fact that you do get so many tools. And
these are definitely tools to use outside of birth as well. There's a whole other thing. I know I've done hypnosis before. That's a show for another day, but it was very interesting. I mean, mine was kind of, led by someone, and it wasn't this aspect of, let's use this and incorporate it into your everyday, Now, one thing that came to mind, I don't know if you ever saw the movie, what is it? Inside Out? Is that the one with all the little people, the core memories? And all I can think of is, we've got the core memories of how our birth was formed. And then we have joy and sadness and fear and disgust, having a party. And that's the critical factors that are calm down. I can see anger, yeah. So that's what came to mind when you were describing all of that. I love it. Because that's what I can see jumping around in the moms. If we've got the high heart rate and we're fighting and we're struggling, it's because, anger's in there, and fear's in there, and disgust, and all of that. They're just they're each speaking their voice, as opposed to kind of
Happiness.
silencing that for a little bit.
Yeah. And happiness saying like, we're good. We're good. Everything's
Joy's
fine.
trying to like get everybody.
Yeah.
Calm. We saw what happened in that movie with Joy trying to do all that. So, anyway, that was my side note with that. Now, so it sounds like there's a homework aspect to this as well too. Like and I don't want to say like it's, quite a bit of work, but in the aspect of you are going to these classes, and then there's work to be done at home. Did you say there was work to be done like for mom to just kind of do on her own? And then there's partner aspects too, because if partner is around, like, are there things that they can do as well? And even if mom is solo, like, is it enough for her to be able to use that on her own?
Yes. So it is definitely a program that was developed it can be used by yourself. So if you are a single mom, if you don't have a birth partner, you absolutely can do it by yourself. And Hypnobabies has sort of created additional tools for those moms. But it also is a program that's developed to have a high partner support sort of aspect. And so, yes, there is homework, and we call it home play. We like to put a positive spin on everything.
I like that. Yeah.
But every week, moms are encouraged to listen to their tracks every day. And so there is a track, and then there's also a script that partners are encouraged to read. And so they kind of alternate between the track and the script. And so part of why we want partners to read the script is that their voices become a hypnotic anchor to their partner. And so when mom is in her birthing time, her partner's voice is automatically soothing to her. And so because she's been hearing it for, all these weeks as he has read to her, and it becomes a hypnotic anchor. And so a lot of our things, the music that we use as well, we have a music that was that is a binaural beats, and so it's that automatically kind of helps your brain
study to that
down,
or the different frequencies.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And we use that in the background of every single one of our tracks, and that music by itself turns into also a hypnotic anchor, so that as soon as you start hearing that music, you kind of instantly sort of start, okay, I can relax.
Mm-hmm.
And so you are encouraged to practice every single day, but then there's also supplemental reading. So we cover a ton of childbirth education in class. So we go over the whole birthing process. We go over your birthing choices. We go over so much content. But then there's additional, every student gets like a thick book with about 200 pages of additional material, and it's split up into the 6 weeks. So each class is 3 hours long. So there's 18 hours of instructional material plus home play. Mm-hmm. And so you get a book, and each week there's a section for each class with additional information. And that's going to just go into things a little bit deeper, because we can't, even those 3 hours gets full.
Mm-hmm.
You can only fit so much into 3 hours. And so it will go into things a little bit deeper. So things like physiological or the optimal cord clamping. There'll be articles in there about, let's talk a little bit more about this. Some of the things are short, some things are just kind of a glance through. Some of it are longer articles for students to read. And then in addition to that, Hypnobabies has a whole online resource guide where if you are like, I want to know, where did Hypnobabies get all this information that they are telling us, you can go to their online resource guide and you can go and see all of their resources to look into things even more if you really are called, feeling a call to do that. And so I kind of, so for some people it might feel a little bit like information overload. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of content. Because Hypnobabies really tries to not hold back on anything. But it is very thorough. And so you're definitely walking away with.
It's thorough. But it sounds like it breaks it down, because you've got those 6 3-hour sessions. So it's not, it can be information overload if it was all in like one
Yes.
aspect, and so it kind of
Yes.
builds upon. So
Yes.
I guess the big take home with it too is the earlier starting with Hypnobabies, the better, as far as using it for labor and birth, and that.
Yes. So the recommendation is to really not wait until later than 30 weeks. That's kind of the latest that you should wait. And I would say that around 25 weeks is about between 25 and 30 weeks is a really great time to get going and start. If you start too early, it might become, it's just like too much for too long doing the practice like every single day. So I would see somebody being sort of like falling off, if that makes sense. And being like, oh, I've been listening to these every day for, so many weeks and I just don't feel like doing it. And then kind of slipping away. And so I would say that it might be better to do it past your halfway mark and not doing it super, super early. But it definitely is good to have, because we do have something called maintenance phase. And so that is after you finish your 6 weeks, we kind of want you to be in maintenance for a couple of weeks where you're just practicing. And you don't, all the reading is done, all the class stuff is done. And now you're just practicing your hypnosis every day. And just because that is compounding. And every time you enter hypnosis, it happens faster, it's easier. So that by the time your birthing starts, you're able to just very quickly, and we talk about, we have a mental light switch that we talk about in class, and you're able to just turn that switch off very quickly and easily. And so that's what we're training for this whole time.
Yes. It's training. I love that. That's why I run a lot. And I know Rachel always likes to talk about the running and stuff that I do, because it does relate so much to your training to give birth,
Yep.
There's some things that can go into it. So yeah, it's just part of the training process. Now with the tracks, is that something you talk about in class, but then that's part of the homework, is kind of listening to those tracks, correct?
Yes. So the tracks, we don't listen to any tracks in class. The tracks are all part of what you do at home. And then you have specifically birthing day tracks. And so those are going to be the tracks that you are going to be listening to during your birthing time. Some of the tracks that you listen to during your pregnancy, you can also use during your birthing time. You end up having a total of 20 tracks. And there's even a track in there specifically for birth partners, which is they call it Relax and Feel Confident. And so just to help birth partners as well with because we sometimes overlook dads and partners, and sometimes they are feeling
they go through a lot of emotions too.
Right? They're feeling a little anxious as well. They might not be physically having a baby, but they are also in the process of having a child, maybe for the first time, that they didn't have before. And they're watching their loved one, going through this process. And it can definitely cause some anxiety. And so we'd like to help our birth partners as well in that.
Yeah. They need the help too. Don't forget about them.
Yeah.
Now with Jessica, and I'm going to link to her birth story because I don't remember what episode it was, and I don't even know when this episode's going to go out. So I'll put it in the show notes there. But she did specifically the Christian hypnobirthing. So is there a difference in the hypnobirthing world for those things? I mean, obviously it would make sense. It's more of a Christian religious standpoint to it, but what does that look like? Does it sound differently? Are the tracks different? What's the difference there?
So the big difference for me and I won't talk about other methods, and I'll specifically just talk about what makes Hypnobabies different. So I don't want to throw shade at anybody else. But the big thing with Hypnobabies is that it is based on clinical hypnotherapy. And so it goes in very deeply in terms of the kind of clinical hypnotherapy aspect. And it's a lot more, I don't want to say scientifically based, but there's much more of a process. It is not just listen to these tracks and become deeply relaxed. It's a lot more than that. The founder of Hypnobabies she actually taught other birthing classes prior to having her own children, then had her own child and had a very traumatic birth and said, this didn't work. Like, all this that I've been teaching for years, like, this doesn't work. I did not like this. And so she went on this mission to find something better. And eventually she came to hypnobirthing. And she actually approached, there is a master hypnotherapist, Gerald Klein. He had developed a pain-free childbirth method, but it was something where you had to go and sit in his office and he would work with you. And so she went to him and said, can I take your program that you've developed and can I take it and turn it into Hypnobabies, which is, we're going to combine it with this complete evidence-based childbirth education. We're going to take both of these parts, we're going to put them together, and we're going to make, create a way for hopefully thousands of women to be able to have easier, more comfortable childbirths. And he gave her his blessing. And so she took his, real like hypnotherapist techniques to creating comfort and turned it into this method of childbirthing. And so things that you get in hypnobirth or in Hypnobabies that sort of sets it apart, I really believe, is one of the things is you are taught how to create hypnoanesthesia, which is something that is used by hypnotherapists in like dentistry a lot, or in medicine, in the world of medicine, for patients that cannot use anesthesia. And they go through this process of teaching them how to create hypnoanesthesia so that they're able to undergo procedures and operations with zero anesthesia. And so we go into teaching our students how to create hypnoanesthesia within their body and how to direct it and kind of move it around and create comfort anywhere they need it. And then we create these hypnotic anchors. And so we have the light switch, the mental light switch, a little light switch in the back of your neck that you can turn off, or you can turn on and you can turn it off. And we can also, something that we have is we have what we call a center switch, which allows you to be deeply in hypnosis, but you can open your eyes. You can walk, you can talk, you can move around, you can interact with people, but your physical body still stays very, very relaxed. We give cue words. So we have multiple cue words that can be used and that we practice during those 6 weeks with our partners. That helps our mom kind of like, okay, let's relax a little deeper. Let's go a little bit deeper. Remember, you can turn off now. And so we use those cue words and those hypnotic anchors to keep our students in that state of relaxation. And so that, I feel like, is kind of what sets Hypnobabies apart, is that it's based very much on clinical hypnotherapy techniques. It's not just listen to some calming, tracks and pretty words and, go, become relaxed. It's, here are actual techniques that you can use.
There's a process to it.
Yes, there's a process to it. And here are tools that you can implement during your birthing time to kind of help you in this process. So yeah, that's why I love Hypnobabies.
The process to it. That's good. What do you get asked mostly, or are there frequent questions that come up from potential clients or, those that are seeking hypnotherapy or Hypnobabies therapy?
Oh gosh. Most of my students that have decided to take Hypnobabies, they come into it fairly well, like, oh, this is definitely something I want to do. I would say that one of the big, from outsiders' perspective, that I've heard a lot is, especially here obviously we live in the Bible Belt. There has definitely been and I will say that myself personally, when I first stumbled upon Hypnobabies, I was like, hypnosis, I was like, what is, like, how does this entirely, I wasn't I was a little bit skeptical until I got into the class and it got explained to me a little bit more, but I was open, but I was still kind of like, hmm. And so I've definitely been met a couple times with, it goes against my religion. Hypnosis goes against my religion. And so things like that, where it's like, well, hypnosis, as we see it in the movies, is very much not what it actually is in real life. So people have this misconception about it where they think that it is somebody controlling you.
Yeah.
And so they think of, a pocket watch swinging back and forth and you going into this trance-like state where somebody can tell you to do whatever they want you to do and you have no control over yourself and you have to do what they tell you to. And so that, again, our belief system that's been created by media.
I was gonna say, sounds just like how did we learn about birth? How did we learn about hypnosis? Good grief,
Yes.
Hollywood. They're infiltrating all things.
And so that is, something that's definitely come up. And so no, and then I try to sort of gently talk about it and say, well, that's what the movies make it sound up, make it look like. But at the end of the day, all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. And even if you go to a show where there is like a stage hypnotist, they are extremely good at picking people out of the crowd that are suggestible. And that person that's there came there that day wanting to be there, wanting to see a show. And then when they usually could bring multiple people up on the stage and then kind of like in the process of elimination, find that person that they think will kind of go along with this the best. And then in that moment where that stage hypnotist is, doing the stage hypnosis, that person is agreeing, and that's, again, it's like you have to say yes. And so that person is saying yes. And so there was an agreement, an unspoken agreement between those two before it happened, that person said, I'm here willingly, I'm willingly participating in this, silliness. And so it was, if he walked up there and was like, there's no way that I'm doing anything, nobody would be able to do anything to him.
Yeah.
And it's the same way with Hypnobabies. And I actually caught myself out a few times with that at the beginning of my process, where there's things in the tracks where it's like, it'll say, and now just, focus on your eyelids, and they just feel so heavy. And if you try them, you'll find that you can't even open them. And I was the stubborn one that was like, I can totally open my eyes.
Tell me what to do. Yeah.
Yes. It's like, don't tell me what to do. And so what I realized very quickly, though, is that it's not going to work if you don't say yes.
Yeah.
So if you want it to work, you have to lean into it and you have to say yes. And you have to say, oh, yes, my eyelids are so heavy. I really can't open them. And so the more you lean into it and the more, because I know that everything in the Hypnobabies, process is good. It's positive. Like, it's all things I want. Like, I want this. Like, what they're offering me, I want this. I want an easier, more comfortable childbirth. I want to change my belief systems on birth. I want this. And so to get it, I have to participate. And if you don't participate, it's not going to work.
Yeah. And I bet some people could even anchor to potentially like Bible verses or something like that.
Absolutely.
I've had moms, speak about that before too. So,
yes. You can incorporate anything you want to into it. And so that is actually with my daughter's birth, we were listening to worship music throughout the whole process as well. And I basically didn't use any of my Hypnobabies tracks during her birth because I could do it by myself so easily. I didn't need instructions anymore. And so I was just leading myself in the hypnosis aspect. But I had worship music playing, which had just this beautiful, it was just like speaking truth to my heart. And it just helped me to kind of release that much more because it gave me something even more that kind of was like, I'm safe. This is, a beautiful process. I don't need to be afraid of what's going on. And so I incorporate with my clients that do have a strong faith. And that was with Jessica.
Mhm.
We spoke at length about about her faith, and she really wanted to incorporate it into her birth. And I said, I think Hypnobabies or Christian hypnobirthing would be a great choice for you, because she had already gone through 3 births. We
Mhm.
knew by that point that she could do this. Like, she could do this. She's already done it. She's
Yeah.
already proved it to herself. I don't think she held on to a lot of fear necessarily. She just needed that surrender. And
Mhm.
so Christian hypnobirthing was the perfect fit for her, because it just spoke into her what she needed to hear.
Yeah. And that's nice though, as far as being able to help people focus on those things and like what is it that maybe they need to hear to help release some of those fears and or some of those things. change the core memory on birth a little bit there.
Yes.
Now with your doula clients, I'm sure you support births even if mom doesn't want to do hypnobirthing. So
Yes.
your doula work can kind of ebb and flow in that. And then the photography work too. So you can come in and be doula and photographer with whatever childbirth education class,
Mhm.
folks choose as well too, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
How has I know you said you just kind of picked up a camera and started documenting the births too. So touch a little bit on how that doula and birth photography kind of ebbed and flowed together.
So I've always been an artistic person. And so I've always thought like, oh, it could be really fun to, pick up photography. I could see myself doing that. I think I could manage that fairly well. And I just never did it. And so with my own births, of course, I had my photographer, and she was amazing. And so I always knew that that was something that I wanted to incorporate. Once I kind of started on the doula path, I said, this is something that's so important to me, birth photography, and like having that documentation of your birthing time, that I started looking into like, how can I incorporate this? And so that is when I found there is a group, and you might know them, called Birth Becomes You,
Mm-hmm.
which is run by 2 birth photographers. And every year, or actually twice a year, they have a class called Essence of Birth. And it's an online class, but they also do, Zoom not one-on-ones. They do like Zoom group meetings every week during the session. And I said, well, I'm going to sign up for this class so I can start to figure out how to utilize a camera. And so that was kind of where it all started. Was I had a camera that I was borrowing from my mother-in-law, but I was using it on like auto, which doesn't provide the best results. And so in this process of going through the Essence of Birth course, I learned how to use my camera properly. I always knew how to make a good composition. That's
Mm-hmm.
something that, like, if you've done any kind of art background, you know how to compose pictures.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew how to take, how to frame a picture. Like, I knew what looked good. But how do I manipulate light?
Yeah,
How
so
do
you can
I
actually see everything. Yeah, how can you get
yes,
the
how do
best image?
and how do you make that, like that depth of field, and so how do you take your camera from auto to manual and start manipulating all those like little things on it? And so that's really what that course told me, or taught me. And I started messing around with it a little bit. I started just kind of throwing in birth photography for my doula clients that were already, they were already my doula clients. I said,
Mm-hmm.
hey, are you okay with me taking some pictures during your birth? And that's kind of how it started, to sort of just get a feeling for it. But yeah, I mean, I just absolutely felt like I really loved it, and kind of took to it quickly.
And
And
it's gone from there. Yeah.
yeah, it's just,
No, I've heard of that group. I didn't know that they did teachings though. I know, don't they do like a photography? Do they do a birth photography like contest or something like that, or
yes,
people
the
can?
showcase, they just did it this year. It was
Yeah, I'm
cool.
always like, oh my god, those images. So
Yeah.
that's really really cool though. And the art, I've found that most doulas that do photography or that aspect, that they do have that artistic background to them. And so it just kind of ebbs and flows into like, well, I've also got this, this helper in me as well too. And so you just kind of put those together and can capture those images. So do you do a lot of home births, or do you do a lot of hospital births, or is it kind of a good mix?
It's a mix right now. I would definitely say that it skews to hospital birth purely because of the need. That's kind of where, the majority of women seeking doulas, at least from my, that's a lot of the population that I'm serving right now is hospital based. I do have, home birth clients. I love doing home births. They are certainly like, it's just such a beautiful experience. It's very different,
right? Yeah.
I love doing home birth. I'd love to do more home births, but it's, I do.
We need more home birth midwives in Georgia. That's what we need.
Yes. Well, and that's actually, so my end goal one day is I know that I have had a heart for, it started with wanting to be an OBGYN, but I have had a heart for midwifery for many, 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 many years. Before I even thought about becoming a doula, I thought, oh, maybe one day I'll go back and I'll become a nurse and then I'll go into midwifery. And so in the years to come, my kids are older and I have more time, I would love to pursue midwifery. But right now this is where I am, and this is where
this is where you're at, and that's okay, because how do you fit in your doula work? Because birth is unpredictable. So every time I send an email to a birth worker to come on and do the show, it's always, every email is like, oh yeah, that date sounds great, as long as I'm not at a birth. It's like that. It's hilarious. So how do you fit in the doula work for children under 10?
So my oldest two are in elementary school. My daughter is in pre-K, which is also basically, full-time school. And then my baby, he just started preschool, and he goes actually on Tuesday, Thursdays, and Fridays. But we have this amazing woman in our neighborhood that has an in-home daycare, and she's just phenomenal. Like she's the mom that bakes cookies and leaves it on her porch for the rest of the neighborhood to pick up. She's just this unbelievable woman. And my son, and once we found her shortly after I kind of started my doula business, and my 2-year-old, when I drop him off there, he shows me the door. He's like, bye mom, leave.
You can go now.
Yes. And so it is just such a blessing to have that support system and know that I have this person that I can send my son to, and she feeds him and takes care of him, and she's just amazing. So, and then on the other side of that, I have my husband, who's just my absolute greatest supporter and cheerleader. And I could not do any of what I do without him. And he, he is stuck at home with all 4 kids regularly. And he doesn't, he doesn't, they're his children. So he doesn't complain. Yeah. He just does his thing. He's just a parent. He takes care of the dishes and the laundry and anything that needs to happen. If I'm not here, he steps in and he takes care of it. And so, I married a wonderful partner, and we definitely, there's no kind of his work, her work. It's just all our work. And so we just do what needs to get done around the house, and we both step in a little bit more when we need to, and when the other person, needs that slack, and partnership. So
I heard Brene Brown recently, some interview that she had done, and it was talking about how her and her husband communicate, and it'll be like, okay, I've got 80% to give today, or they come in and like, I got 20, I'm going to need that push pull, that give take kind of thing. So, but that's what you to live in that unpredictable birth worker world, you need that. So you need that support system. So that's why I wanted to highlight that a little bit. Okay. So again, tell us what your business name is, and where can people connect with you and find you and reach out to you?
So my business name is Harmony Birth Services, and you can find me online at harmonybirthservices.com. I'm also on Instagram. There I am Harmony Birth ATL. So not Harmony Birth Services, Harmony Birth ATL. And then I'm also Harmony Birth Services on Facebook. And that is kind of those are my main platforms. So my website, Instagram, and Facebook.
And you do regular hypnobaby hypnobaby birthing classes. Do you offer them both in person and virtually?
So I currently, the class that's coming up is actually going to be a hybrid class.
Okay.
And so we will do the first and the last classes in person. And then the middle 4 classes we will do virtually over Zoom. And that has been, so what I have found is that a lot of people want an in-person aspect. And so they don't necessarily want to do all virtual. But then because the Atlanta area is so big, meeting 6 weeks in a row in one location can be difficult for people coming from far away.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you only have to come for the first and the 6th class, that's a lot more doable. You only have to travel that, 2 times. And then the rest is going to be, and I think I'm sort of still playing with what is going to work the best, but I feel like I really like that model. And so I might stick with that for the next couple of classes. And so my next class that's coming up starts on October the 13th and runs through November the 17th. And that's going to be on Fridays from 6 to 9. And that first and 6th class will be at Exodus Health Center in Kennesaw. And that will be my last class for this year. And then coming up next year, I will probably only be offering quarterly classes, so every 3 months, because it is a six-week long class.
That's a big, yeah.
And I'd rather, have one class that's full with, that have a lot of people in it. It's also nice for people to kind of be able to talk amongst themselves.
Yeah,
I create a Facebook page for each cohort so that they can also, on Facebook, they can send me questions. I'll post things there for them. Sort of a way of keeping in contact. And I love for everybody to then share their birthing stories once they have had their babies. But yes, so the last class for this year is coming up in October.
And all of that, the Hypnobaby classes are on your website, correct?
Yes. So the one that starts in October is listed on my website under the Hypnobabies tab.
Yeah. Let's see. Anything else you wanted to mention or talk about with doula work or what you do or Hypnobabies or anything? I know we talked about a lot.
I know I talked a lot. That's always, when you get me talking about things that I'm passionate about, I can definitely talk a lot. So
every birth worker's like that. So I have an outline so I can try to keep us on
yes.
path. No, you had lots of good information though.
Yes. No, and it's, that's, as a doula, I just want to see women supported and given that information. And so that is what, even when you don't have hypnobabies, but even if you haven't done any prep leading up to your birth, I always tell people that my goal for you during your birth is that when we face those questions, we're able to look at all the information. And once you have all the information, at that point, every single time, mother's intuition is the way to go. When mom knows the risks, the benefits, the alternatives of every option, and then she looks within herself and says, this is what I'm feeling is the right next step, it hasn't failed yet. Even when I don't agree, even when I'm like, I don't know if that's the right choice, I don't say it out loud, but even when I have doubts, every single time, mom's intuition, when she has all the facts, that's the key. She needs to know all the pieces. When she knows all the pieces, and then she looks inside and says, I think this is what I want to do, it's the right choice.
And she's the active participant instead of it just happening to her. And those, I mean, I feel like one of your keywords is choices and letting women know that there are options and choices in labor and birth. And it's really, it's discovering those.
And it's their birth.
Mm-hmm.
They are allowed to make the choices. They don't just have to go along with whatever is being told to them.
Mm-hmm. I know. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. I had such a good chat with you, and I hope everybody goes and checks out your website, learns more about babies and what it can offer the birthing community. Thanks, friend.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us on the Aligned Birth Podcast. We hope you found our discussions informative, inspiring, and enjoyable. Remember, when your body, mind, and intuition are aligned, you have the power to overcome any challenge that comes your way. We appreciate your support and leaving a review or rating, signing up for our newsletter, or becoming a direct listener supporter. Your contribution helps us continue delivering valuable content and reaching more listeners like yourself. Stay connected with us through our newsletter to receive the latest episodes and bonuses straight to your inbox each week. You can also connect with us on Instagram at aligned_birth. All links can be found in the show notes. Together, we can make a difference in the lives of the birthing individuals and new moms. Thank you for being a part of our community. We look forward to sharing more empowering conversations on the Aligned Birth Podcast. Until next time.